Some people have a habit of doing nothing, sitting idly whole day. They behave as if they own this house. Gina, Jimin's stepsister, indirectly taunted Wyan, who was sitting on a single couch with her laptop on her lap. She was an editor, hence editing some documents. Their parents don't need them. That's why they married them off for a deal. Who would want to keep a useless person in their home? I mean, nobody wants unnecessary burden. Her mother, Monica, played along with her daughter, taunting Wyan. They were enjoying their time by verbally abusing someone who was already broken and abused. Wyan's finger halted hearing her words. Her calling their marriage a deal felt like a dagger to her heart, but it was true. She knew her marriage was nothing but an unwanted deal, and her husband's indifference didn't fail to remind her about it. Or if she forgot anyhow, then there was her stepsister, a stepmother who threw hurtful remarks whenever they got chance. If she wanted, she could retort back, but she knew better. Whom would she complain about all this? Her parents, who were worse than anyone. For them, she was nothing but a burden that they got rid of through a deal. Her brother was more important for them. She still remembered her wedding day when her mother told her to unalive herself before thinking to return back home. Or her husband, who had forgotten he had a wife at home, who never bothered to acknowledge her presence. For him, his work is more important than anything else. In 2 months of their marriage, he was never there for her. Hell, she didn't know if he came home or not because she always slept on an empty bed and woke up in the same, without his presence. When her own people didn't mess to remind her position in their life, whom should she confide in? Thus, she was accustomed to this kind of treatment and had adapted to ignore these kind of people. As they say, ignorance is bliss. Closing her laptop, she pushed herself off the couch. She made her way towards her room after collecting her stuff. During ascending the stairs, she heard the mocking laugh of two ladies. Without sparing them any glance, she quickly climbed the stairs and disappeared in her room. Closing the door behind, she heaved out a sigh. She placed the laptop and other stuff on the small table in front of the bed. Her hands reached out to massage her head, which was throbbing with pain. First the house chores and then the unnecessary noise those women created had surged her headache to great extent. Bringing out the first aid box, she gulped down Tylenol with water and lay down on the bed. Half an hour passed tossing and turning on the bed. Neither her headache subsided, nor she could sleep. Getting off the bed, she walked over to the large glass window and draped the curtains properly so that no sunlight could peek inside. Walking back to the bed, she lay down and covered herself with a quilt. Extending her hands, she turned off the nightstand lamps as darkness clouded the room. She shut her eyes, and in few minutes, sleep consumed her senses. The wicked mother daughter duo was busy gossiping about random nonsensical things when Jimin walked inside. His pale face, droopy eyes, and dark circles screamed about how much he was overworking himself. He noticed the two ladies who were gaping at him as if he had grown two heads. Well, it was normal for them to be shocked because the person who spent his whole day at office was home at broad daylight. Oppa, you are early today. Is something special? She probed, munching on chips. He completely ignored her because his eyes were busy searching for his wife, who, at that moment, was nowhere to be seen. Are you looking for wine? She's in your room, probably sleeping. She doesn't do anything except eating and sleeping. She rolled her eyes. Her venomous voice was full of bitterness. He didn't like the way she was talking about his wife. A thought stuck inside his head. Was their attitude was inimical towards his wife? Without paying any heed to their rumbling, he made his way towards his room where his wife was. Entering inside the room, he was welcomed by darkness. Raking his eyes through the murk, he desperately searched for the sight of his wife. A huge sigh escaped his lips when he spotted her figure cocooned under the blanket. Her slow and even breathing was an indication that she was in deep sleep. He silently tiptoed towards the bathroom to take a warm shower. He came out after a few minutes, a towel tugged at his waist, and water was trickling down from his hair down to his body. He went inside the walk-in closet to wear clothes. He came out wearing a plain black t-shirt and grey sweatpants. He ran a reckless hand through his now dry, messy hair, disheveling them further. He trudged towards the bed and carefully climbed beside her. He turned on his side, facing her. The blanket was covering her till her neck, only her head was visible. Her face was still glowing amidst the darkness. The serenity on her face provided an instant relaxation to his heart. It worked as serotonin booster, giving away a feeling of sheer calmness. He shifted towards her and awaited her to cuddle him like she does every night. He frowned when, even after 10 minutes, she didn't make a move to hug him. His teeth sank in the cushion of his lower lip as he carefully lifted the blanket and slept inside. As he imagined, her clutch on the blanket loosened and she shifted towards his body warmth. A small smile curved on his lips when she wrapped her arms around his waist and thumbed her legs over his thighs. He sighed in contentment and pulled her closer by her waist. The time he had spent around her, he knew she was a heavy sleeper and won't wake up easily. Her warm breath was hitting against the fiber of his t-shirt. Her palms lay flat on his toned stomach, her legs on his muscular thighs. Satisfied by their position, he closed his eyes, ready for an amazing ride of his dreamland. Jimin's peaceful slumber was disturbed by a continuous knock on the door. He groaned and opened his eyes. His eyes traveled to Wyan, who was sleeping soundly, holding him for life. He sighed and carefully untangled himself from her, not wanting to disturb her sleep. He strolled towards the door, rubbing his drowsy eyes. He opened the door slightly and peeked his head outside. A scowl made its way to his face when he found Gina standing there. "What?" he asked when she tried to enter inside, but he didn't let her by standing firm on his position. "Is Wyan still sleeping?" she said, trying to sneak a peek, but Jimmy stood in the middle. "Get to the point," he exclaimed, his voice devoid of any emotion. So was his face. "It is the time of our evening snacks," she replied in a low voice as she was scared of Jimin. Though he always remains calm and ignores them all the time, yet his bold personality is enough to make people's hands sweaty. "So, what does this have to do with my wife?" He raised an eyebrow. Gina gulped and looked everywhere but him. She prepares our evening snacks. That's why I came here to remind her." Her voice came out as a mere whisper. Jimmy's heart sank to his stomach hearing this. Do they really treating her like this behind his back? Does he fail to stand up for his wife and let them order her around? By God's grace, you and your mother both have working limbs, so prepare your snacks by yourself. Do not bother my wife for petty things. She is my wife, not your servant. But he didn't give her another chance to speak and closed the door on her face. He exhaled deeply and rubbed his face. His frustration was on its peak. How dare they treat his wife like that? But wasn't he the one who was responsible for this? Only if he were more considerate towards her and gave more attention to his family's conduct towards her, it wouldn't have happened. His lips twisted into a small smile when his eyes fell on her, who was sleeping peacefully, clutching a pillow in her arms. She was very fond of cuddling. With no intention of disturbing her sleep, he sneaked inside the bathroom to freshen up. He walked out, wiping his face with a towel, and watched the scene unfolding before his eyes. Wine was rolling on bed, from one edge to another. He nibbled his lower lip, stifling the laughter that was about to break down. He stood still, observing her every move. She sat up on the bed with eyes still closed, mumbling something under her breath. She got down the bed and walked towards the bathroom. Jimin blinked his eyes and stepped aside when she burst inside the bathroom, almost colliding with him. He got to know one more thing about her, that she could skillfully walk to the bathroom with her eyes closed. He shook his head at her antics. Turning on the lights, he settled down on the small couch placed at one corner, waiting for her to come out. One came out in front, seeing the brightness in the room. As far as she remembered, she turned off the lights, then who switched them on? Shrugging off the unnecessary thoughts, she walked towards the door and held the doorknob, but before she could open it, Jimin called her. Where are you going? She froze on a spot and slowly looked at him. He flinched when she shrieked loudly and ran out of the room. Jimin was left dumbfounded. He blinked his eyes incredulously, processing what just happened. Meanwhile, Vine ran inside the kitchen. She stopped holding the kitchen island, panting heavily. Her hand reached out to her chest where her heart was beating at a wild rate. Did he really come early, or was she hallucinating? Shaking off her thoughts, she indulged herself in preparing dinner. Tears pooled in her eyes, remembering the behavior of her in laws. Her mother in laws fired the cook and helpers the next day she got married. It was not like her parents were any better, but she survived through their misbehavior with the hope that her husband and his family would provide the love she craved her whole life. But she was left with shattered hopes and vulnerability. Jimin closed his laptop and heaved out a long, loud sigh. He got an important call from his office and had to fix the problem immediately. He reclined back on the couch and stared at the ceiling. He frowned when his wife's thought crossed his mind. He straightened up and glanced at the digital clock. It had been an hour since he fled from there and hadn't returned yet. Was she avoiding him? With thousands of thoughts clouding his mind, he rose from the couch and went outside to search for her. After searching the whole house, he turned up at the kitchen and found her there. She was transferring the cooked dinner into dishes. His forehead creased when he didn't find the cook or any helper inside the kitchen. Had she been doing all the work alone? He stepped forward and stood beside her. Why are you cooking food? Where are the helpers? He asked monotonously. She flinched and snapped her head towards him. She stared at him. It was the first time they were close to each other. Only if she knew she cuddles him every night. She came back to reality when he cleared his throat. She tore her gaze away from his face and focused back on her work. What would she tell him? That his mother fired all the workers so that she can torment her as she wants? Would he believe her, or would he support his mother in troubling her? Sure, she did what she had adapted herself into. She ignored him, picked the dishes, and moved to the dining table, placing them there. He stood there, dumbfounded for the second time today. The person who had people working around on his orders, who had always been the center of attention, got brutally ignored by his wife. He scoffed. A scowl took over his features. Unknowingly, his lips slightly puckered into a small pout. He stormed outside and settled down on the dining table, glaring at the plate in front of him. Soon after, Monica and Gina joined the table. They sat like queens, waiting for wine to serve them dinner. Jimin's father was out for a business trip. Wine was about to move towards them, but Jimin held her wrist. He lifted his gaze, searching for her eyes. Sit down and eat. His voice lacked the softness as it came out as an order. Wine frowned in irritation. He sighed, realizing his mistake, and pulled her to sit beside him. But I have to serve dinner. She trailed off when he gave her a stern look. Everyone in this house are capable enough of serving food for themselves. You are no one's servant. You won't do it ever again, yeah? He looked at her after serving food for her. She glanced towards the other two persons who were glaring at her. Jimin turned her head towards them, who instantly dropped their eyes, acting innocent. But Jimin knew them better. Where are the workers? He darted a stern question towards them. They gulped and shared a glance before looking at Jimin. I fired them. I mean, why do we need workers when we have one? She doesn't do any work. At least she can do the basic chores. Wine clenched her jaw, controlling the tears that pooled in her eyes. Right, then from tomorrow onwards, you and your daughter will do your work by yourself. You don't have any work, at least you can do the basic chores. Repeated her words. Wine snapped her head towards him. It was the first time someone stood for her. A long tear slipped her cheek, not because of their hurtful words, but because of the overwhelming feeling surged inside her heart. She wiped it before Jimin could see it. But there's no ifs and buts. Either you call the helpers back or everyone will do their work by themselves. He stated with seriousness, which sealed their lips for further argument. Eat wine, he said to Wine, who was staring at him without blinking. Wine flinched back from her reverie and started eating. The ambience of the dining room turned dead silent. Only the sound of forks and spoons clanking against the plates could be heard. Wine was occasionally stealing glances of Jimin, who was eating peacefully, a permanent scowl plastered on his face. Vine was sitting on the bed thinking about what happened at dining table. It was hard for her to believe someone actually took her side. A small smile appeared on her lips, remembering their face when Jimin told them to do the dishes and dragged her out of there. Her train of thoughts broke when Jimin sat beside her. He cleared his throat and gazed at her side profile. Vine, can we talk? For the first time in 2 months, he made a move in their relationship. Though Vine was upset, still she nodded her head and awaited him to speak. Look at me, he said, keeping his voice soft this time. He didn't want to repeat the earlier mistake. She craned her neck, peering at him. I don't know where to start. I know till now I had been nothing but a disappointment to you, but he trailed off and sighed. His hands reached out for hers and held it gently yet tiredly. Wine looked at their intertwined hands and back to his eyes. I am sorry. I don't have any excuse for my absence in our relationship, but I promise to be better. I won't disappoint you ever again. His gaze was stuck at their hands, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. Why? Why so sudden? Do you finally remember you have a wife? Or is this an act for another deal? You are a great businessman, right? For the first time in 26 years of her life, she complained, openly revealing her distress about his behavior. She tried to retreat her hand back, but he didn't let her and tightened his grip even more. I am tired, he whispered and lifted his gaze to meet her eyes. I'm tired of pretending I am okay being alone. I'm tired of staying away from you. I'm tired of treating our marriage as a deal when it's clearly not. I'm tired of loneliness. I'm tired of seeking solace in darkness. I want to love someone. I want to be loved by someone. I want a home. My home. His voice broke at the end. He sucked a deep breath to gain his composure and looked back at Vine with a small smile. Vine's eyes turned glossy hearing him. She saw her reflection in him, a lonely and broken soul. A sheer desire to embrace him and melt into his arms arose within, but she held herself back. No matter what I explain, you will probably think of me as a selfish person. I am not blaming you, I am the one to blame. But I want to make amends. I want a chance. Can we start over, please? He looked at her with hopeful eyes. His sincerity and honesty was reflecting in his dark brown orbs. He was in his unmasked state, pure, raw, and vulnerable. One contemplated between her heart and mind. Her mind was saying to hold back and let it going like usual, but her heart was nagging her to give in, to take the risk with the hope that maybe, just maybe, this will change her life for good. The risk she won't regret ever in her life. And if anyhow he turned like other people, there was nothing he could take away. One more shattered hope will add up to the list, and her heart will closed off for anyone else to enter ever again. Okay, his smile widened. Her own lips curved into a small smile. Do you have my number? He asked after a few minutes of silence. Wine frowned. Why was he asking this all of the sudden? You tell, do you have my number? He nodded. She looked away from him, feeling bad. I don't have because you never gave me, she whispered in an undertone. Jimin gave a gentle squeeze of her hand, which made her look at him. I am sorry. I'll add my number in your phone, he said, and a thick silence spread between them. This time the silence was comfortable. Wine, he whispered, breaking the serene silence between them. I am going out of town for a workshop, he informed. Her heart sank into her stomach. They had just started talking and he was going away. Jimmy noticed the gloominess on her face and added, It's for just 3 days. I'll be back really quick. Till then, we will talk on phone, okay? He said, to which she reluctantly nodded. And Wine, you don't have to be scared of anyone. Don't let anyone overpower you, not even me. Nobody owe you. You are not alone, I am here, okay? She nodded, smiling at him. A contented smile appeared on his lips. It wasn't as hard as he thought. In fact, it was beautiful, an overwhelming feeling. His silly best friend wasn't as silly as he thought. Kim Taeyong, no matter how much weird and buffoonish antics he does, he was one in the millions. He was a great friend. He was the only person Jimin could rely on. His advice of communicating with Wine and giving a chance to their relationship turned out to be successful. Will you please help me in packing? I actually am a bit clumsy person. I tend to forget things. He scraped his neck in embarrassment, which made Wyan chuckle. She found it cute. Nodding at his cute request, she made her way towards the closet with him hot on her tail. It's it had been 2 days since Jemma left for his trip. All the helpers were back on the work, which gave relief to Wyan. She could focus more on her work now. But today, Monica invited her friends for lunch, using the absence of Jimin for her own benefit. Wine, honey? She called Wine, who was going to kitchen to fetch some water. Wine turned towards her, shocked by her sugar-coated voice. She feared she could diagnose with diabetes with her honey-dripping voice. Yes, can you please make coffee for my friends? The helpers are all busy in preparing lunch. I could have called Gina, but she has fever and sleeping in her room. I promise I won't bother you for anything else. She smiled sweetly, hiding ill intentions behind a smile. Vi nodded, not wanting to present herself as rude in front of outsiders. She didn't want it to give them a chance to gossip around. After some time, she came back in the living room holding a tray. She was about to serve them coffee, but Monica put her leg in between. She stumbled and the tray from her hand fell on the lady sitting beside her. Loud gasps escaped from the ladies present there. Monica stood up, weighing a shocked expression. She turned to Wine with blazing eyes. If you didn't want to make coffee, you could have denied. Why did you throw it on my friend? She humiliated her in front of everyone. I didn't do it on purpose. You stuck your leg in between. Wine defended. Monica gasped, acting all innocent. Is this what your parents taught you? First make mistakes and then talk back. Maybe you lack manners, but I know how to fix a mannerless person like you. She lifted her hand. Wine instinctively closed her eyes, waiting to feel the slap. Heavy and intense silence spread through the living area. Wine opened her eyes when she didn't feel anything. She looked at Monica to see a horrified expression on her face, her hand hanging in the air. Wine looked behind to find a furious Jimmy standing there. His eyes met hers, and they softened instantly. He strode towards them with heavy steps and stood in between Wine and Monica as if protecting her as a shield. Leave, he said to the other ladies, who wasted no time in fleeing away like bees. He glared at Monica. His gaze held a hidden warning. Whoever dare to raise their hand on my wife, I swear I'll cut their hands. And I'm not exaggerating, I mean it. Monica flinched on a spot. A shiver ran down her spine at the coldness on his tone. It's right when they say a calm sea is more disastrous. I don't know what made you think that you hold the power to boss around my wife. Get this thing out of your mind. I am saying it for your own good. Do not anger me. stressed on each word he uttered. The calmness on his face was contrary to the blazing volcano inside him. What is happening here? Their attention diverted to Jimin's dad, who had just returned from his business trip. He was confused, witnessing the Cold War between Jimin and Monica. Ask your wife or your daughter, they'll explain better. He threw a last glare at Monica and Gina, who was descending the stairs, and strolled away from there, dragging Wine along with him. Locking the door, he sighed and turned to Wine, his eyes soft and seeing her glossy eyes. He gently held her shoulders. Are you okay? She didn't hurt you, right? I wasn't late, was I? He probed. Wine shook her head and threw herself in his arms and broke down into loud sobs. Hey, it's okay. I'm here. No one can harm you. Don't cry. Wrapped his one arm around her shoulder and stroked her head with other hand. She nuzzled her face on his chest, crying hysterically. Jimin kept holding her, not knowing how to comfort her. Her sobs were piercing his heart. When she calmed down a little, he parted away and cradled her face between his hands. You okay? She nodded and wiped her face with the back of her hand. You came early. Yeah, and I'm glad I did. He said and pulled her in a hug again. A sigh escaped his lips. His heart settled at ease. She was safe in his arms. Let's go. Wyan moved back and looked at him in confusion. Go where? Let's move out. I don't want to live here anymore. No, Jimin, I don't want you to separate from your family because of me. We can find a solution, right? He shook his head. They are not my family, Wyan. He moved inside the closet and came back with a photo frame. She is my mother. She was my family, Wyan. Showed the photo. It was his mother and little Jimin in her arms. She left me when I was 6. Ever since I have no family. Dad was always busy in his work. He got married so that I could get a mother, but wiped the lone tear that slipped down her cheek and looked at his mother's photo with a small smile. I tried to be her son, but she could never be my mother. When Gina was born, I was happy that I became a big brother. I tried to be a good elder brother for her, but guess what? She turned out to be as vicious and selfish as her mother. I don't hate them, but I don't like them either. I'm better off like this, and now that I have you, I don't need anyone. He assured her with a smile, but she wasn't convinced. Think with a calm mind, Jimin. Don't make impulsive decisions. I don't want you to regret later. I'm not making any impulsive decision. I have been thinking about it for a long time. I think it's time we live separately. What about Dad? Wine was worried for Jimin's father. For her, he was like her own father. I had already discussed it with him. He doesn't have any problem. No matter how bad those women are with us, at least they love Dad, and I am okay with that. Wine hesitantly nodded, still uncertain about his decision of moving out. Wine and Jimin descended the stairs carrying their bags. The atmosphere of living room was tensed. Jimin's father was glaring at the mother-daughter duo. Disappointment was clear on his face, while the ladies were looking down, ashamed of their behavior towards Wine. Dad, we are leaving, he informed. The old man got up and stood before them. I am sorry, Wine. I am ashamed of their behavior and I am more ashamed with myself. I am sorry. Your dad wasn't there when you needed him. Wine shook her head and hugged him. Please don't apologize, Dad. He patted her head affectionately and pulled back. Take care. He turned to Jimin and hugged him. Jimin closed his eyes, reciprocating the hug. Take care of yourself and Wine. Don't hesitate to come to me for anything. No matter how much you grow up, I'll always be your father. He patted his back. Jimin parted away and nodded with a small smile. Monica and Gina walked towards Wine. Their head was ducked down. I'm sorry for my behavior, Wine. Please forgive me. I'm sorry too, Unni. It's okay, she replied monotonously. She wanted to say it was not okay. A small sorry couldn't compensate for their inimical behavior towards her, but she didn't want anything with them. Instead of holding grudge, she forgave and let the Almighty decide their punishment. It's beautiful. Why is I looking around the apartment in adoration? Jimin hesitantly sneaked behind her and snaked his hands around her waist, taking her in a back hug. He placed his chin on her shoulder whilst she looked down, shying away. It's my mom's apartment. I always wanted to live here with my family, he confessed. A smile widened. Mom's choice is the best. He gazed at her side profile with hurt in his eyes. His heart skipped a bit when she called his mother as mom. She was the best too. Come, let me show you around. He moved back and held her hand. A sudden enthusiastic feeling crept inside him. Finally, he had someone whom he can call his family. He can be himself in front of her. He didn't have to pretend or fake anything. In front of Wine, he can be Jimin. Wine, Wine huffed in frustration, hearing her husband calling her for the upteenth time. It seemed like he was hell bent on annoying her early morning. She turned off the stove and made her way towards their room, resolute to give him a peace of mind. What? Wyan snapped, stepping inside the bedroom. He grinned and spread his arms. I'm drained out of energy. I think I am hug deprived. Wyan said. The last 1 month she spent with him, she came to know that her husband was a kid trapped inside a big body. She walked over to him and hugged him. He hummed in contentment and closed his eyes, enjoying their close proximity. You're so soft. I can cuddle you whole day and skip office and sleep. Sounds good. He tightened his grip, but Wyan removed his arms and stepped away from him. She squinted her eyes at him. Go to your office. You skipped office yesterday. I can't handle you every day. Go and give me rest for some time. He pouted and reached out to hold her, but she yanked his hands away. You changed, Wyan. You are not my sweet wife anymore. You always scold me. He whined and forcefully hugged her despite her protest. She let out a sigh and stroked his head. Go to your work. I promise I'll cook your favorite dinner. She bargained, knowing it always works. He whined but nevertheless nodded. Wyan smiled as she put the brownies in microwave to bake. After preparing dinner, she decided to treat her husband with brownies as he would be home anytime. She cleaned the kitchen and washed the dirty dishes in the meantime. After being done with the work, she poured herself a glass of water and gulped it in one go. As she placed the glass down, she was engulfed in the familiar embrace. She smiled and leaned back, melting in his warmth. He nuzzled his nose on her cheek and sniffed her. Why are you behaving like a dog? She asked with a chuckle. You smell like chocolate. He nuzzled his face in the arch of her neck. Because I made brownies, she laughed as his ear felt ticklish. He twirled her around. Her laughter died down, feeling his intense gaze staring down at her. She closed her eyes when he leaned down to her face. His warm breath fanned against her skin, sending goosebumps all over her body. She shivered when he placed his warm lips on her left eye, followed by the right one. Trailing his lips down, he placed a gentle peck on her nose. His lips placed lingering kisses on either cheek, staying there a little longer. Her breathing accelerated, just heaving up and down. Her lips parted in anticipation when his hot breath fell on her soft mounts. Her nail dug in his bicep as she awaits him to claim her lips. He licked his lips and leaned down, all set to steal her first kiss. He closed his eyes, gracefully decreasing the gap between them. Just as his lips was about to touch hers, the microwave beeped, interrupting their intense moment. Their eyes snapped open and they parted away with a jerk. The ambience turned awkward as they avoided each other's gaze. I'll serve the dinner. She tucked her loose wisp of hair behind her ear and stepped towards the microwave to take out freshly baked brownies. I'll come back after changing. He turned on his heels and stormed away from there. Wine was sitting on the bed, staring blankly at the laptop screen. Jimin was sitting near the window, trying to focus on his work. After the almost kiss event, they were avoiding each other, though they were occasionally stealing glances of each other. Irritated by the silence, Jimin called out for Wine. Wine, are you busy? Wine closed her laptop and shook her head. Can you help me with these documents? I am having difficulty in editing them. Sure. She got on the bed and settled beside him on the floor. She took the laptop from him and started editing the documents. Her whole focus was on the task given, while Jimin's whole attention was on admiring her. What are you doing? She frowned in confusion when he took the laptop from her and put it aside. He lay down on the floor, keeping his head on her lap. Wine froze on a spot. Swarm of butterflies erupted from the pit of her stomach. Why are your cheeks red? Are you blushing? He poked her cheek. She slapped his chest and looked away, a shy smile dancing on her lips. They stared at each other. A comfortable silence blanketed around them. Jimin cupped her cheeks, stroking her cheekbone with his thumb. Did I tell you how gorgeous you are? He whispered ever so softly. No, you didn't. She teased with an impressed smile on her face. A throaty chuckle rumbled through his chest. He slid his hand from her cheek to her nape and pulled her face down. A sigh slipped through her lips when he placed a chapstick kiss on her forehead. His soft and warm lips lingered there a little longer. Backing off a little, they shared a smile. Jimin's gaze flickered from her eyes to her lips and back to her eyes as if asking for consent. This time, she leaned down and captured his lips between hers. Their lips glued to each other without moving as they smiled. Wyan sucked his lower lip while his worked on her upper lip. They closed their eyes, relishing the moment as longer as they could. It was their first kiss, so of course it was not perfect. Sometimes their teeth clashed, sometimes their noses became the hurdle, sometimes they struggled to keep the pace, but whatever it was perfect for them. A slow, soft, and passionate kiss. I am home, he breathed out, staring at her with different emotions in his eyes. Me too, she whispered, resting her forehead against his.